Put your headphones.
Wait. We're getting there.
Ask if you can hear.
Aaron, can you hear me now?
You can hear us, but can you hear him?
I can't hear you yet, but I'm sure I will. It's funny, you sound better when I don't hear you.
I might have done it.
We good? Oh,
We're gonna have to go off headphones.
okay.
1 sec, just give it a sec. Can you hear?
No.
Okay, just go off headphones.
Can you hear me, Aaron?
We can't
Yeah?
hear you, Aaron. Can you? Bear with us 1 moment. We're gonna fix.
Aaron, can you say something?
So, others in the chat, if you don't mind, just letting us know if you can hear Aaron, because Aaron, I think it could be your mic, but I could be wrong.
But people can hear me, right? Aaron, you can hear me? Okay, so before Aaron gets on, I want to welcome everybody, and I can see some names. Annie Conover, thank you for joining. Brooke, my world famous wine director. She's on because of you, Aaron. Trust me, she's not on because of me. Jim Walker has been supporting us all along. You've met Jim a few times. He comes to Premiere every year. And I'm only mentioning names that I know personally. Let's see where Leslie's on. She's the GM of Saint Helena Winery and has done a great job getting this organized and helping us out, of course, with technology. Noah Bass, you know Noah very well, and a bunch more people are on, and we're still waiting. So what we're going to do when we finally do it is today we have the pleasure of being with Aaron Pott. I would say an old friend, but you actually are an old friend. I was thinking about it. We probably met when you worked for Quintessa. Don't say anything, because of course I can't hear you. We're going to taste 5 wines today. We're going to taste 5 wines today. We're going to taste 2 white, 3 red, We're going to taste, this is perfect. Aaron doesn't have to say anything. We're going to taste Pot Viognier, 2017. Delicious. And look at the package. It's got embossed, it's fantastic. Wine and label. We're going to taste Saint Helena Winery, 2017 Chardonnay from Sonoma. We're going to taste Saint Helena Winery, 2016 Napa Cabernet, estate bottle. We're going to taste Pott Napa Valley Cabernet, and I love what he's done with the label. It now says Aaron and Claire Pott and daughters, and that's the 2016. And then we have the pleasure of tasting Aaron Pott Action Stag Leap District from the Quixote Vineyard in 2016 also. So while we're waiting for Aaron, I am going to tell you a little bit about Aaron. And it's kind of awkward, right? You know, here he is so close, but so far. He's talking to Michael and they're trying to figure it out. He's gone. Okay, so it's really great to be able to taste wines with a person of Aaron's caliber. He's been making wine for a long time. He's been actually making Saint Helena, working as a consulting winemaker for Saint Helena Winery for over 10 years.
How's that?
See if he's here yet.
Hello. I think you got me now.
I'm sorry about this.
You got me? You have me?
Michael's doing.
Yeah, you can hear him.
I can hear him, Michael says, but I can't.
Can you can't hear me? Hello.
There you go.
Technical difficulties. Technical difficulties.
Oh my God, you sound great. Aaron, it's so good to hear from you.
Gary! There you are.
So sorry to everybody for the technical difficulties. Wow, you know, it is what it is. We have a lot of people in our house now. So I'm not used to wearing the headset, so we've decided that with everything going on, and I don't really have a private room to do this, the best way to do it is to have me put the headset in, and clearly I did something wrong. So I needed my technical supervisor. Well, Aaron, thank you very much. You're home, I take it?
Yes, yeah. Sitting in my dining room.
So I started to say is I think most people were able to hear, but I did feel like I was talking to myself, which is kind of bizarre because, you know, I don't listen to myself. We've known one another a very, very long time. And I believe it was, when did you make Quintessa?
2004, I started making Quintessa.
And in honor of you at Quintessa, I have one left. Can you see the queue?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I'm surprised I broke those so easily.
It's so funny. I had, I think, a set of them. And so I have one left. So I dug it out for you because I was trying to think back of when we met. And I believed it was at Quintessa. So,
it may have been before that, Gary, when I was working with the Beringer guys as the International Winemaker of Mystery.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. So let's talk about that. So you went to UC Davis.
Yeah. Yes.
You studied enology.
Yeah.
First off, how did you get into the winemaking business? Why? Why winemaking?
Well, when I was a kid, and it's a kind of an old story, but my parents took me to Paris for the first time. And the first night I was in Paris, I ordered a glass of milk in a venerable old bistro. And the waiter looked at me and said, "Milk is for babies," and brought me out a glass of wine. And so at 9 years old, I thought, this is going to make me an adult, this wine stuff. So I need to learn as much as I can about this. And fell in love with it really through that. On that trip, we visited several other wineries, and I saw that everybody had sort of three things in common that I really wanted to have in my career. They all worked outside. They all worked with their dogs, and uh, they all had these amazing 17th century chateaux that they lived in. And I thought, you know, that all those things would be cool. So far, I've got 2 out of 3. So
The chateau?
don't have a
But-
17th century chateau yet. Working on that.
Working on it. But you do live in Saint Helena now. We're walking. When I'm in Saint Helena, I can walk by your house. But I'm in New Jersey, so can't do that right now.
Yeah, well, I
and
can't
then
wait till you get back and we can have dinner in the backyard again. That was nice.
I'm looking forward to it. And I'll bring a bottle of wine this time.
Yes, and Michael can bring a soccer ball.
Deal. He was so excited to do this and set it up because he wants to play soccer with your team.
Well, he can anytime. We need him.
Yeah. And for everybody, just feel free to add, you can ask questions. There's a Q&A. If I see him, I will get to him. If not, we will get to him towards the end. And I just want to get through this because, Aaron, your resume is pretty impressive. I mean, me knowing you as well as I do, I'm not that impressed, but God, you worked at Newton, right? For how long were you at Newton?
That was my first job in the my first real job in the wine industry. I got hired as the assistant winemaker under John Kongsgaard at Newton in 1990.
And talk about an icon in the business, especially Chardonnay in the day.
Yeah, and that's I was originally hired as the white winemaker. So I was under John's tutelage in charge of the Chardonnay, and that was the first year we made the Newton unfiltered Chardonnay. So
Awesome.
Pretty big season for me.
And then
you know, still working with John. Few months go by without me calling John up on the phone and talking to him. He's a great friend.
It's one of the luxuries or pleasures I've had since opening the store in Saint Helena is I've seen John a couple times come in, and I haven't seen him since wine tasting probably 15 or 20 years ago. But there were a million people there, so it's a very different experience. And then Michel Roland suggested you make wine in Bordeaux. How'd that happen?
It was kind of the other way around. I suggested to Michel that I should make wine in Bordeaux. So Michel was the consulting winemaker at Newton, one of many, but probably the most, the one that lasted the longest there. And I realized that he was very lonely when he would come out to Napa Valley. He only had 2 clients at the time. It's hard to imagine that, but he had Simi over in Healdsburg and then Newton here in Saint Helena. And he would come out for 3 weeks at a time, and his English was terrible at the time. It's much improved. But so I would invite him over to my house for dinner and meet with French friends and so on, and make him food from back home. And he was very happy to come out here. And then one day I got up the nerve to ask him if he would find me something so I could get back to France. And I was imagining myself working in a cellar somewhere, maybe getting paid. And about 2 weeks after I asked him, he called me up on the phone and said, "I have the perfect job for you." And I didn't realize I was applying for the job of winemaker at Chateau Trollon-Mondeau until I drove up through the gates of the chateau. So
what a fantastic chateau it is.
Yeah, amazing place.
And how long were you there?
I was in Saint-Emilion for almost 7 years.
That's awesome. And then you came back to the United States?
And then I sort of came back to the United States because I took a job. It's kind of a funny story. My mother called me up on the phone one day and said, "I saw this amazing job in the classified ads in the San Francisco newspaper, and I sent your resume in." And it was for, they were looking for a winemaker to work all over the world, and they had to have an enology degree, and they had to be proficient in French, Spanish, and Italian. And my French and Spanish were very good. but my Italian was non-existent. So I got hired as the Beringer International Winemaker of Mystery, and started running their overseas operations in Chile and Argentina and Italy and France. And they sent me, pretty much the first month that I worked there, they sent me to Italy to learn Italian. So I spent a month in Florence learning Italian.
Well, sounds like a great gig.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And then you ended up back in the United States. So you worked for them, and then you were at St. Clement, right? Which was that in their portfolio at that time?
Yeah. So funnily enough, when Foster's bought Beringer in 2000, there was a guy in the Foster's world in Australia that decided he loved my 11th century Castello in Tuscany, and took over managing Castello di Gabbiano. And so I was out of a job there, and they felt kind of bad that they were stealing Castello di Gabbiano from me. I didn't feel bad about it at all. I was kind of relieved. But so they decided to give me Saint Clement to sort of to create a rebirth there. And so in 2001, 2, and 3, I made wine at Saint Clement.
Well, while you were doing that, I got thirsty while you're talking. So I started tasting, because I can't, you're a charming guy, but I can only listen so long without having a glass of wine. So I tasted, and do you have in front of you do you have the 17 Viognier in front of you or not?
I don't have a single bottle left of 17 Viognier.
Well, we at Gary's Wine Marketplace, I think we have like 9 or 10 bottles left.
I think I might have to come down and buy a few.
In New Jersey. Well, can we ship it back to California? It seems kind of ridiculous.
That's a good excuse to go to New Jersey.
Absolutely. Let's talk about Viognier for a second. The aromatic, I had Michael smell this, and I didn't open any of the bottles because there's too many. So I have this new Coravin gadget. So it's the new improved version. So I Coravined all the wines, and probably around 6 o'clock. So I let them breathe. The Viognier is peach, and it's just the aromatics is unbelievable. So tell me about Viognier. Why Viognier? And tell me what you're thinking about it.
So kind of my love for Viognier goes back to those Newton days. John gave me free rein to plant a couple acres of vineyard at Newton, and so I had a lot of time to explore different varieties to plant, and we were looking for white grapes to plant specifically. And so I planted a half acre of Tokai Friuliano, Friuliano as they call it now, and then a half acre of Viognier. And I fell in love with the wines of Condrieu, and thought it would be a good variety here in the mountains. And when I planted my estate on Mount Veeder, I had a section of vineyard that was north facing. It was the lowest section on the property and the coolest section. It goes into a redwood grove, and the redwood grove creates its own humidity, and it's much cooler in that section. And I thought, I want to plant something that's going to ripen at almost the same time as the Bordeaux varieties that I've planted, if not only a little bit earlier. And so I came back to thinking about Rhone varieties, and I thought I'd love to plant Syrah, but my neighbors, Steve Legier and Carol Meredith, make an excellent Syrah, and I didn't want to ruin their show. And so I planted Viognier, and it's a half acre planting. Again, the vineyard is entirely, it's 100% organically farmed. I use a lot of the biodynamic techniques that I developed at Quintessa, but also converting to biodynamics the property in Saint-Emilion, one of the properties that I ran, Le Tour Figeac. And so I use a lot of the biodynamic technique that we used over there. And everything's organically grown. It's fermented in clay amphora. So we bring these amphora over from Italy. A guy named Gusmano Manetti, it's the same family that owns Fantodi.
Oh, sure.
And
Well, I got to tell you, we tasted this Premier Napa Week when we went up to see the vineyard, and I loved it then. Actually, when we opened, Claire was nice enough to sell us a case for the Saint Helena store. She didn't tell you, I'm sure, because
I don't have any more.
and of course we sold it right away, so we don't have. But I got to tell you, it's so expressive. It's so delicious. Thank you for sharing that. And then, so after Barringer, you went to Quintessa.
Yes. So after
Sure, I got that right.
Saint Clement, I went to Quintessa in 2004, tempted over by Augustin Huneeus to come run that beautiful property, which was a great experience.
Yeah.
And it was what made it fun for me was he had just started doing a lot of research into biodynamic vineyards, and they had just decided that they wanted to take the whole vineyard and go biodynamic with the whole vineyard. So myself and the viticulturalist over there, Michael Sipiora, who's a fantastic viticulturalist, turned the whole property over to biodynamics and had a great time doing that.
Yeah, it was great property, and obviously the vineyards were fresh. They were not replanted. So you had a great. So tell me, why do you like biodynamic so much and organic?
I mean, I have to say I'm a defrocked biodynamicist, and it's a long story, but just to give you the short version, I started making my own preparations because biodynamics was created in a Middle European context. The guy, Steiner, that created it was born in what's now Slovenia. And everything in biodynamics is essentially trying to force the grapes to get ripe, bring the heat to force the grapes to get ripe, or force the crop to get ripe. And we didn't really have a California biodynamics, because that's not our problem in California, is getting grapes ripe. We can do that easily. We have exactly the opposite problem. We want to get them ripe without getting them dehydrated and losing the flavor and the texture of the wonderful grapes. So I started developing my own biodynamic treatments that were based on California native plants, and that went over poorly with the biodynamic groups. And so I decided to go off in my own direction and continue working with that. But I think organics is important for me because I think you lose, by not farming organically, you lose a lot of the flavor, you lose a lot of the microbiology that's important to the site, to the terroir, that is so important to wine. And
let's pivot a little bit to Saint Helena Winery. You know, you make so there you work with an associate winemaker, right?
Yes.
Lindsay.
Yeah, Lindsay.
And she's also the farmer. Does she do the farming, or does she just oversee the property?
She oversees the
agriculture?
Farming. Yeah, I have to say there's a group, the family, the Ninos family, that really does all the work in the vineyard, but overseen by Lindsay. And
it's a small property. It's 13 acres.
13.08 acres, yeah.
About.
So, yeah, just about.
And it's also in Saint Helena, but it's on the opposite side. So you and I would it would take us like a 15-minute walk to get there.
Yes, yeah. So
but we would do that.
We could do that, yeah.
We could do that. You had the Chardonnay?
I do have it.
Okay, so this is the 2017 Chardonnay. I got to tell you, for me, every time I taste Saint Helena Winery's wines, aromatics are the word I think about. You know, and after you smell it, taste it, and then I'm going to ask you a question about aromatics, and then more specifically about this wine. And it's funny, Premier Week every year there's an event, and I think usually Saint Helena Winery is at Charles Krug for their open house. And every year I go over, and the first couple of years I see Leslie there, and I would smell the wine. And at that point, for Premier Week, I'm focused on the lot number. And then the secondary thing. So, because I'm going in the book order, and in my mind, who I like, what do I like, what lot number, what lot number, what lot number. And I think 3 years in a row, I taste wine. I'm like, oh my God, it's so expressive. The nose it's spicy and aromatic, where you're tasting a lot of big, fat, juicy. The Saint Helena Winery, and I think 2 or 3 years in a row, I'm like, who's your winemaker? And I think the third year she said, before you ask, it's still Aaron. But my point is the aromatics here are spectacular. So tell me about what you got when you tasted the Chardonnay.
Well, I mean, the first thing that pops into my nose is the pear, but there's sugar cookie is always what we get in this.
Sugar cookie, I love that.
It smells like freshly baked sugar cookies. And
it's funny. I was thinking it had a ripeness to it. I don't need a lot of sugar cookies, but that would be good. And I was reading so you used 10% new wood for 18 months, just to give it a little touch of wood, and 100% malolactic. What does the malolactic do for the readers?
It makes the wine richer. It gives some of the aromatic characteristics that people associate with Chardonnay, the butter characters, the caramelized characters that people really associate with great Chardonnay. And one of the important things for us is leaving the wine on its lees. You know, the lees is the debris that falls to the bottom of the barrel when you barrel ferment. And by stirring that lees into the wine, we release a lot of protein compounds. And if you imagine eating a packet of ramen and you forget to add the MSG in there, the little spice packet, it's similar to that. When you stir the lees, you get all of these protein compounds that create great richness and softness in Chardonnay, and in any wine really. So it's all about releasing those manoproteins from the yeast.
I love it. I've always loved it. It definitely it's again a textural wine for me, and it's got rich. And it's a 2017, and I think it drinks very. I think this would even age for a Chardonnay. Do you believe in aging Chardonnays, or do you drink the wines too?
Absolutely, love to age. I mean, I love older wines in general, but especially Chardonnay. And there are very few, I think, that can age well, especially in this climate. And I think what gives this kind of an edge is it's from a vineyard in Sonoma, on Sonoma Mountain.
Right.
And it's a vineyard that faces away from the sun, so it's facing towards the east. And
that's an area that's heavily affected by the fog, right? The influences of the bay you get over there.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You're very close to the sea there. It's on Sonoma Mountain, quite high up, 700, almost 800 feet in altitude. And then it's looking towards Mount Veeder. So you're looking towards the western hills of Napa Valley. So very cool site, very close to the sea, high altitude as well. We got some great Dijon clones in there also. It's an older planting, and great farming. It all comes together to give us a really bright, acidic Chardonnay that has some life to it.
It sure does. I want to take a step back to Viognier, because a question came in and I didn't see it when we were tasting, and I'm trying to be fair. So what does the amphora do to the Viognier grape versus other vessels?
I see that was sent in by a beautiful woman.
Yeah, well, everything in life is debatable. A talented woman. How's that?
So the amphora, it's neutral. It doesn't have any flavor in it, but it's porous as well. So one of the things we love about wood barrels is that they have an interaction with air, that you can have both evaporation but air entering into the wine as well. And by having evaporation, the wine concentrates itself. You lose either alcohol or water, depending on the humidity in your cellar. And then by having air entering into the wine, it softens the wine. You have tannins combining into longer chains. You have a sense of softening in the wines. And it's the same in an amphora. You have that interaction with air. It's a vessel that you can have air transfer through the side of the vessel. So unlike vessels that are more dense, like cement or stainless steel, which doesn't have any interaction with air, you get that softening of the wine, and you also get that concentration of the wine. But you're not adding any oak tannin. So you're not getting the harshness of the oak tannin, and you're not getting the flavor of the oak either. So you're really just tasting the pure Viognier aromatics there.
Yeah, love it, and the Chardonnay I love. We need to get to the king of California, or Napa, Cabernet.
Yes.
So I've had a couple Zoom virtual tastings, and we have so much fun, and then all of a sudden we get to the Cabernet and we're out of time, and I get all these nasty comments later on about not getting to the point. So we're doing the Saint Helena Winery Cabernet 2016, right? I'm going to talk while you taste, and then so this comes from the 13.2 acres in Saint Helena, correct?
13.08.
Oh, I'm sorry. 13. I wanted to pretend I was actually listening at that point. So 13.08. What kind of soil? What kind of soil's over there?
Okay, so it's interesting. This is sort of the classic great Cabernet Sauvignon soil of Napa Valley. It's bale clay loam, and there are sort of 3 different versions of this bale clay loam based on the kind of amount of gravel and the amount of clay in the soils. And what you had at one point in time, there's a creek that surrounds the vineyard. It really runs down the north side of the vineyard. And that creek, York Creek, used to go right through the vineyard, and it deposited layers and layers and layers of rock in the upper reaches of the vineyard. And then on the lower section of the vineyard, you had the Napa River that also was depositing rock. So you have these just layers and layers of cobbles, rock that's like about that big for the most part, but very deep layers of it. And so it's very well drained. You have excellent concentration of fruit. There's small berries, very little yield. I mean, it's almost obscene, the yield at Saint Helena Winery. They're very, very low yielding vines. It's a vineyard that's been, that's 20 plus years old now. So it's getting some age to it, and obscenely low yields, and low yields mean greater concentration. And so the wines are very concentrated, but have a wonderful softness to them. And I think this is a perfect vintage to really see that softness.
It's funny that you say that, because when you were talking, I'm like, what I'm not getting is that jamminess.
Yes.
Right. But what I am getting is that richness, and the tannins are just supple. It's not tannic, but it's not soft. And it's, again, back to your aromatics, the aromas are great. And you do get some of that soil and some of that earthiness in the nose, which I love.
Yeah, I mean, and that's Cabernet Sauvignon. We don't want to shy away from the earthiness, the spice, and so on.
And this is not a shy wine.
No.
And Tom asked if we carry Saint Clement wines in, I'm assuming in Saint Helena. No, I don't believe we carry any Saint Clement right now. Are they still making wines under the Saint Clement label?
I don't know if they're still making wines under the label, but the winery itself was sold to the Huneuses, who have converted it into the Faust House.
Really?
So
Is that that was what was under construction recently, right? Wasn't it being
Right.
renovated? Because the last time I was there was a lot of construction going on.
It's been totally renovated, and it's really beautiful. I have a dear friend who took me up there to check it out, just to get back and see the old girlfriend. And they've done an amazing job. I mean, you know, the Huneses have great taste.
They sure do.
And they put that all together.
But as far as the Saint Helena Winery, we carry all of their wines. I know we have them all in New Jersey currently. I believe we have them in Saint Helena. I'm not 100% sure what we have, but we can always get them for you, Tom, if you'd like. So next, how would you like to talk pot?
I'd love to talk pot. I just want to say that this, you know, the estate vineyard, it's all one single vineyard at Saint Helena Winery, and it's a very rare thing that you have a small vineyard that also has a winery on it, and doesn't buy grapes from the outside. So all of the wines, all the red wines are made from that small estate vineyard, and it's a real luxury to work with an in-house crew. Most vineyards have an outside crew that comes in to work on the vineyards. We've had the same crew, and it's a father and his two twin sons that have worked on the vineyard. They've worked there longer than I have. They were there from the very beginning. And he has 40 years of experience working in vineyards in Napa Valley. Fabulous.
And it is a beautiful site.
Yeah.
Now to shift gears a little bit, I'm tasting the 2016 Pot Napa Cabernet. And in New Jersey, our wholesaler wanted to buy your 17, so we bought all the 16 he had left. So that's why we still have a little bit. Okay, tell me about it, please.
Well, I make, under the pot label, I make wines. I make 4 wines from my estate. And those 4 wines are: 1, the Viognier; 2, a wine called Agnès Sorel, that's a 100% natural wine, that's 100% Cabernet Franc. Then I make a wine called Space and Time, that's Cabernet Franc based with Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon. And then I make a wine called the Incubo, which is the Cabernet Sauvignon wine from there. And then I make wines from other vineyards. Her Majesty's Secret Service from Pritchard Hill area, Stagecoach Vineyard. Cali Holmanook, that's from Ballard Vineyard on the top of Spring Mountain. Turf War, that's from the vineyard that's owned by the Basagno family, that's just above the Colgan property, Tixon Hill. And then a small vineyard called Garcia Family Vineyard on Howell Mountain. And the pot wine Napa Valley is all of the wines that we select after we make those single vineyard blends. We put together a blend that's pot wine Napa Valley. So it's a little bit of our estate wine, a little bit of those wines that we work with in other appellations in the Napa Valley. So 100% Napa Valley, little bit of Cabernet Franc in there, a little bit of Merlot in there, but mostly pure Cabernet Sauvignon.
Do you have this or no?
I don't. That's another
one. Wow. So do you remember what it tastes like? Or do I have to do all this myself?
Aromatically, it being very, very strong blackberry, black currants, aromatics.
Currant. It's funny. What I got first was currant.
Yeah.
And so this is more, when I think of bigger, richer, style, I think of that black currant. You get that beautiful currant. And dark berry flavors. It's the aromatics. And again, we keep coming back to aromatics, but the aromatics, and it's so distinctly different, which is kind of cool because I think they're priced similarly to Saint Helena Winery. And if you want 2 wines that are totally different in style, both would be great for your cellar. And I think they're both available at Gary's Wine and Marketplace. I'm just going to throw that out there. So more about the 16 vintage of Pott. And then we can touch on the 17 also, because that's just released.
Okay, so again, 16 is a great vintage. I think it's a vintage where you have amazingly dense wines, but wines that are super voluptuous, super soft wines. And it was a great vintage for that. The Pott, as opposed to the Saint Helena Winery wine, is almost all mountain vineyard. So it's in 16, there was only one vineyard that we had on the valley floor. That was the Action vineyard in Stag's Leap. So there'll be a little bit of Stag's Leap fruit in there, but everything else is from hillside vineyards. So you've got Spring Mountain, you've got Owl Mountain, you've got Mount Veeder in there, and a little bit of upper St. Helena on that, the lower slopes of Spring Mountain.
Awesome. So you need to support St. Helena. So tell me a little bit, compare for me your 16 versus 17, and maybe the vintage, the growing season a little bit. Everybody focuses on October of 17, as opposed to everything that happened before then.
Good place to focus on.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for me, the most important difference between 16 and 17 is 16, you have very nice weather all the way through the summer. There's only 2 days post veraison, and veraison is the time when the grapes soften and change color. So green grapes go golden color, red grapes become red, go from green to red, and they soften out. And that's probably the most dangerous time for us to have heat events. And that really is what makes a great vintage or a not so great vintage in California, is whether we have intense heat from that period of veraison to harvest.
Right.
And so in 2016, on the 25th of September, we have 2 days of temperatures over just at 100 degrees in St. Helena. And if you look at 2017, we have a series of heat events that not only bring us about a week's worth of over 100-degree days, they're really high hundreds, 110 degrees. And then we have single-digit humidity on those days as well, which is unheard of. We had 7 days where we had above 100 degrees and single-digit humidity at the same time. Usually Napa Valley is pretty humid, and that allows us to kind of weather out those high heat events and allows the grape not to shrivel and become a raisin. But in 17, we had this really intense heat and single-digit humidity, and that was very tough. And that's essentially what led to the fires in early October.
So during that single-digit humidity period, did you water? Did you so irrigate? Did you do anything to protect the vineyards or the vines at that point, or was it
kind of it's kind of too late? If you need to put water on, the vines shut down really at about 95 degrees, and they don't transpire anymore. So there's nothing really you can do. So the grapes are kind of shriveling on the vine. If you water, they'll continue to pump water through the vine system, and that will cause the grapes to shrivel as well, because they'll essentially pump dry the available water to them. So it's a very tricky thing. One of the things that we've developed in using our biodynamic teas is I use a series of different sprays that are derived from both kelp and aloe vera, and the kelp and the aloe vera or the yucca, they have sort of natural sunscreen in them that keeps keeps the leaves moist, keeps the fruit moist, and acts as sort of a barrier to that heat. And so
So
we
have the-
will
the
apply.
guy come and spray it?
Yeah, we'll spray it on the leaves before a heat event and after a heat event in order to weather those heat events.
Well, that's interesting.
It works better than irrigation.
Yeah, from what you're telling me now, I get that. Now, I wasn't sure I understood before, but now I do. And so in the 17, when did you pick?
So in 17, up at
Or
my
the-
property, we got the last fruit off of my property on the 6th of October. So that was, the fire started on the night of the 8th of October. Yeah, we're very, very lucky.
Yeah, very lucky. I'd rather not dwell on the 17 at that point then. But I would like to, Jim Walker asked a question, and I'm going to paraphrase it. He's saying you're a master at many different varietals. Is there a different project or something you're going to be coming out with in the future that we should be on the lookout for?
Well, I think you haven't seen yet my 100% Cabernet Franc wine from off of my property, and that's the first vintage we put into bottle will be 2019. And again, it's an all natural wine, no added sulfur dioxide, so it's unusual for us. I spent the last 5 years taking trips to France and Germany and going to see all the natural wine producers in many different regions. And I was just satisfied with what I was seeing. And so I wanted to try to challenge myself to do a natural wine and see if it could be done.
So when do we get to taste that? Next year?
Next week, if we want to.
I got to get back in order to accomplish that. Anyway, so the six, for me, the 16 is drinking beautifully. And do you have any of your wine?
I don't have any of my wine, no. I don't even have that on.
Leslie, I hope you're not upset with me for equally tasting Aaron's wine and Saint Helena Winery. So the last wine I'm going to taste from Aaron is the Pot 16 Action.
Action, yeah. Action is the mortal hunter. In Greek mythology, he was out hunting and he saw Artemis or Diana, the goddess of the hunt, and she was bathing naked in a stream, and he stuck around and looked for too long, and she saw him and turned him into a stag, and he was eaten by his own hunting dogs.
Wow.
Yeah,
I don't know if I should be mortified or how. I don't know where to take this.
I think he's the first victim of the Me Too movement.
I was thinking about looking to see if there's a picture, but then I got nervous. Now I'm not even looking at the label anymore. And you used to make Quixote wines for a long time.
Yeah, so this is from that. For those that know, Quixote was founded by the founder of Stag's Leap Vineyards, a guy by the name of Carl the Ayatollah Domeni. And Carl Domeni is a very special and unusual guy, as anybody that has met him can attest. But Carl called me on the phone in 2008 and said, I really need someone to make my wines. They're terrible. You need to come down here right away. And then hung up the phone on me. So I went down to Quixote and tried his wines for the umpteenth time, and they were indeed not very good. And so he said, I've got a deal for you. You can make your wines here in my cellar. I'll give you 1.5 acres of vineyard to play around with. You can do anything you want with it from anywhere on the property. And I'll pay you in art. And Carl had a pretty good art collection, so I thought that was quite a good deal, and so took him up on it. And we moved pot wine into into Carl's world in 2008, and we had been making the wines at Quintessa before that. So I moved into Carl's place, and we made the wines up until 2017 there, and then Blackbird and we built a facility in South Napa where we make our wines now.
Okay. I've yet to be to the Blackbird facility.
Yeah.
Maybe next time. But we did.
Gary,
I've got a lot to do. I know. Besides eating and drinking, I want to. There's a lot of things I need to do, and one of them is get out of the house. But that's a whole. That is a whole other discussion. So tell me what we should expect. So you make this every year, correct? The Action?
2017 was the last year we made Action, because the property Quixote was purchased by a Chinese group.
All right.
The Yatai group from Changchun, northeastern China, and they had different ideas than Carl did, and so
I think everybody has different ideas than Carl.
Yeah, we were missing Carl, so we decided to move out to Blackbird, and so we don't get our free grapes anymore there.
That's a shame. I got to tell you, this the wine is delicious. B, since it's not going to be made anymore, now would be a great time to stock up on whatever Gary's has left, don't you think?
I agree, and it's a wonderful wine. It's one of my favorites. I remember the first year in 2008 when we made this for the first time. We were on the sorting table, and a bunch of us started spontaneously singing the theme to the Jeffersons, because we had suddenly arrived in a deluxe appellation on the east side.
So I got to tell you, the nose is more pronounced than the 16 Napa. It doesn't have as much currant to me, but it has more velvety, more richness to it. The mouthfeel is a little rounder, but both have the same tannin structure.
A lot more red fruit in the Action. It's much more red fruits, raspberry, currants, red currants. It's
long and lush and delicious. So what else can you tell me about the 16 versus 17 versus 18 vintages? Is there anything you want to share?
Well, I think the 18 vintage is stunning. I'm across the board. Some of the best wines I've had in Napa Valley are coming out of that vintage. And you have two kind of back-to-back great ones. 18 and 19 are spectacular vintages. And really for that same reason we talked about, where you just don't have any hot days in in the two vintages. There's no anomalies or heat spikes. They're all ideal temperatures throughout the year, and great growing season. The 18's a big vintage, so those people that didn't watch their yields probably didn't make wines that were as concentrated as those people that did very carefully watch their yields. I'm thinking of Saint Helena Winery. You try the 18s and they're very rich and beautifully luscious. And you try other vineyards where the yields weren't cleverly watched, and it's not quite as good. And then
there's definitely a big range in 18 vintage. I mean, we've tasted some very good, reasonably priced 18s. We've also tasted some that are just fat and simple. Yeah,
and I think it's a vintage where you have quite good acidity too. I mean, both 18 and 19, the acidity is quite bright, and the wines are beautifully fresh. Especially 18, they're very fresh wines, and I think they'll be very long-lived. Great density and so on.
I could be a fresh wine. So something we really haven't touched on that I'd like to touch on briefly, and then maybe play a little trivia, have some conversation. When I taste the Viognier, I'm going to go all the way back, and I'm smelling it. What kind of food? When you think Viognier, what do you eat? What do you craving?
It's so versatile, Viognier, because it has the kind of natural sweetness. Although it's a totally dry wine, it has a natural sweetness that can deal with spicy foods. So you can think of curries and so on, But it's also, we love it just with salumi, you know, having it with a little bit of meat or bresaola or something like that. It's ideal for that kind of thing.
Yeah. And Chardonnay, typical Chardonnay?
Yeah, I mean, I think Chardonnay, you can go anywhere. I mean,
Yeah.
this Chardonnay, it has such a wonderful richness. You could eat foie gras with it. You know, it's.
Are we still allowed to? Are we allowed to eat foie gras, or is that off the list? Like,
I don't know. Maybe I'm going to get called up by PETA or something.
Well, I hope you get called before me. And Cabernets, when you're drinking your Cabernet.
I think, you know, anything rich, red meats, lamb, anything.
Yeah, I could actually, I'm the kind of guy that I could drink Cabernet without any food, just because it's easy. I mean, they're tannic, you know, but it's, I don't have to think about it. Can we talk Blackbird for 1 second?
We can.
Would we buy, and Leslie, trust me, Saint Helena Winery, they're the best wines ever, but you know, I got to throw the love around everywhere. So you've been with Blackberry for a long time also. How long have you been there?
14 years.
And I don't, you remember my son worked actually for Blackberry for a week during his before college internship. It goes back, and you make a lot of Cab Franc and Cab Franc based wines there.
Yeah, it was really. It was designed perfectly for me, Blackbird, because it was one guy, Michael Polensky, early on, who found this Merlot vineyard and fell in love with Merlot, and then he needed to find a guy that knew how to make Merlot, and wasn't a popular variety at the time, so he found me.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it's and obviously the wines are great, and most of them are not Cabernet based.
Yes, yeah. So I mean, real focus on Cabernet Franc and Merlot, but also you know, a few little things here and there. We do a Syrah in there, Sauvignon Blanc Semillon blend, Dissonance, and the new owners. We recently were acquired by friends of mine that had been investors forever, that took over the show, the Hinshaws. And they're really
nice people,
wonderful people, and getting back to the basics, really focusing on the wines that made Blackbird what it was known for.
Oh, that's awesome. So hopefully there's a good future there. Are you making wines with Blackbird in other areas or other than Napa?
We have been making some wine in Lake County under the Arena label, which has been fun. Working with the Beckstoffer vineyards up in Red Hills in Lake County.
Yeah, we've tasted some wines there, and they've been delicious. We don't have that much time. I have two questions totally unrelated to winemaking or things I want to bring up. Do you have anything else you want to tell me about wine or winemaking or your philosophy?
No, just we're very simple. You know, it's all indigenous yeast, open wood containers for the fermentations. Everything's aged in barrel for the reds. Few amphora here and there.
Awesome. So I want to tell a story that I'm not sure I've ever told you. So we had dinner at your house last summer.
Yeah.
And so I sit down on the way you had it set up is you had like this bench for the kids and then individual chairs for the adults. And I didn't know, so I sat in the bench. And your youngest daughter, what's her name?
Isolda.
Isolda came up and she says, Mr. Fisch, those spots are really for the kids. You're supposed to sit in the adult chair. and I'm like, but if I want to sit there, she said, no, you know, we have a plan and you're supposed to sit in the adult seat. So I did. And then later she said, I don't know what, I think dessert came or dessert time. And she said, you know, people say that money doesn't buy happiness. And I believe money can buy happiness. And I'm like, it can how? She says, well, if you have money, you can buy cows. And with those cows, they produce milk. And with that milk, you can make ice cream. And what kid doesn't like ice cream? So therefore, money can buy happiness. And I'm like, this child is unbelievable. It was, it made me feel good. It was like very adult and very kid. It was very natural. And I really had a great time, hanging out with your family and drinking some great wines. And I plan to, and I don't know if you want to talk about this, but I'd like to touch on it. Tell me what your father did growing up. I just read this.
Oh gosh.
Do you mind?
There's
a
lot of things that he did, but I think the thing you're referring to was that he worked for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee.
Yeah.
And he was based in Mississippi, so kind of the nastiest part of the civil rights movement. And he essentially sat at lunch counters with blacks. And when they were told to leave, he would get in front of them and get tough and so on.
That's unbelievable. Is he still alive?
No.
Oh,
I got another one for you. In 1954, he was drafted into the NBA, and he was drafted to the Syracuse Nationals, and he decided not to play because of racial segregation in the NBA. So
that is what a background. I had no idea. That's amazing. You should be really proud of that.
Yeah.
It's a great history in light of everything going on. I was going to bring it up, then I wasn't. We're sitting here chatting about, how fortunate, you think about we're drinking great wines, we're talking about great wines, but it's unsettling to me out there. And I wish we could do more. I don't know what we can do. And then I read the article about your father, and I'm like, we should all have the nerve to do and what it does for the next generation, right? The example he set for you and for the world around him. And for that, cheers to you, cheers to your father, and to better times. And thank you very much for your time and everybody for watching.
Thanks, Gary.
I hope to see you soon in Saint Helena. If not, you're going to have to schlep out to New Jersey.
Tell me when you're coming out here. We'll fire up the barbecue.
All right. I hope soon. You had to get Liz's permission. Take care, everybody. Thank you for watching, everybody. Thanks. Have a good night.